I got a pointer, I've got everything. I'm good now. Okay, because I work for NRCS, we have to look at things in a different way. We look at things 7 generations down the road. We look at the whole landscape. We're not as much about this year's production and how much money am I going to make. That's a factor, but it's not the whole deal that we're looking at. We want to look at soil conservation. This field is CRP. And so if you're considering going to no-till, you got to be tough-minded, get your emotions completely out of there, and think about what reality is. A lot of the land that's in CRP is on marginal land. It hasn't got enough moisture to really produce enough biomass or enough residue to keep things going. And so you'll see a decline over the years. The yields will go down, soil condition will go down, but the first couple of years will be fine. People would have a tendency to go ahead and try it because wheat prices are up right now, but you might do it and deplete your land. One of the things that you need to do is also take a good hard look at your field. You know where the gullies have been forming for the past 40 years. Well, guess what? They're going to keep forming there. So if you've got a grass cover in it, you might as well avoid killing that grass out in the gullies. Let it be there to protect them. Right? Let it make a grass waterway to protect those gullies from forming. I am so proud of this picture. This is Ron Francis took this picture. That's yours truly in there. And that's my ex used to say, the more of me I cover up, the better I look. And as you can see, you can't even see my face there. Now, what I did is I went out into the field on the south side of the road, and just with pure faith. Now, anybody with any sense would shop around to do this. But I didn't. I just went in, shoved my shovel in the ground, reared it back, and this is what I got. Those of you that are really close, you can see the soil profile there. Now, this is conventionally tilled ground. And you can see right there a break. It's a plate that's formed. And that's tillage compaction. Whenever you take a tool across that soil, it polishes an area and seals it off, essentially. And if you look below that, there's just another one just a little bit deeper, and then another one. So there's these plates that are formed in that soil that inhibit infiltration of water. They inhibit root growth, so they're causing problems. Now, above that, this soil is massive. Now, we call it massive if it hasn't got any structure. Good soil structure is if it's looking like little BBs in there. It's got all kinds of microbes and things that are growing in the soil that hold it into those shapes of BBs. And if you squeeze those BBs, they're kind of hard. And because the soil is like a big old pile of BBs, the water comes right through it, compared to what we've got here, where it'll go in as far as you've tilled, and then it hits that pan, and if you get more water than what that will hold, then it just starts to run off like soup. So that's a real problem with conventional tillage. The other part about massive soils like that is the lack of organic matter. You've tilled the life out of that soil. The lack of organic matter takes away the reservoir of nutrients. As those soil microbes are a reservoir for nutrients, and as they die, in their cycle, the circle of life, as they die, they release those nutrients slowly to the wheat crop, and so it's spoon feeding through the air. If you haven't got those microbes in there, you've got straight soil. You put nitrogen on, it's available now, and it's not available then. There's not a reservoir. Okay, so I went across across the road over into this CRP ground. He's actually planted this. It's been sprayed. Those grass plants don't know that they're dead yet, but they are. I'm mourning the fact that you can't see that picture very well. But I'll tell you what's there. I put my shovel in. I had to cut around a little bit because there were roots there in the soil. I pulled it back, and those little BBs, that good structure, that good soil structure, went from the tip of my shovel clear up to the very back. The CRP soil that had been in 20 years had healed itself from being excessively tilled for too many years. So it's possible to do. Now, one of the problems we'll do, as soon as we start to till it again, we'll get back to that platy structure and the same series of problems. So that's why we try to no-till into CRP. CRP takes water better than tilled ground. Now, some of the research shows that if you rip the soil in the fall, it'll absorb more moisture than if you don't. And that's true as long as the moisture comes nice and slow and those compacted soils can absorb it. If it comes fast, in a 6-inch rainfall in June, it's going to wash. Now, the other thing about CRP soils is there's a reason why they were put into set aside. These are not the best soils. They are not the best soils. They're erodible soils. They're generally shallower. They generally have a little less capacity for yield, a little less water capacity. Now, this picture was taken about 2 weeks after that previous slide. You can see that the grass actually did recognize the fact that, yes, I am dead, and so it went ahead and turned yellow. Now you can see barely, if you look closely, there's a safflower plant in this row. You can see it's just starting to come. So safflower was tilled directly with a single disc drill, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it was still planted right into that grass. Now, there's good things about that. One thing is, if you plant grass after grass, the insect pests that were in the CRP are going to affect the wheat. So there was a lot of black grass bugs out there. They're not going to affect the safflower as much as they would have affected the wheat. So it's good to have that break in different types of crop. The more diversity in crop rotation that you have, the better, always. The tough part is figuring out how to make that pay and figuring out how to logistically do that. And that's sometimes beyond me. But safflower is a good crop to rotate with wheat in northern Utah, if you can get a market for it. One of the advantages of safflower too is if you missed a few spots, or if that grass seed was laying dormant when they sprayed it and then came up a little bit later, with safflower they got a chance to come in after it and get it with another grass killer. So it's an advantage to kill the weeds. The most important thing about what we've talked about, no-till, is weed control. And an integrated pest management plan is the most important part of it. And one of the constraints that researchers have is that, okay, they're going to schedule things to be exactly on these dates, and so the weeds might be 10 days too old when they spray it, because they've got to replicate year after year. Well, that can mess things up. 10 days to a weed is the difference between surviving or not. So the weed control management is more important than any other part of it. When we write specification sheets for no-till, we ask the guys to go out there every 2 weeks and take a walk on the field to scout, see what is out there, and make a decision whether it's time to spray it now, whether to spray it later, or whether just a few of those plants are something that you can deal with. But you can't ignore these fields. You have to be more intensive management. A spring crop rotated with a fall crop breaks a lot of weed cycles. That's one thing that they've done on the farm up there, and this afternoon you'll be able to see how clean of fields they've got. They're pretty darned impressive. Another source for information on the no-till up to the church at Blue Creek Place is YouTube. NRCS Utah has got some videos up on YouTube, and that's one of the videos that are playing in the back by the table there. NRCS will not help you with this part. We're not allowed to make weed control recommendations. We're able to document what decisions you've made, and we're very, very interested in what the crop consultant told you. But you can imagine the legal liability that we've got of making a recommendation. Everybody wants to sue the government, and so we don't do it. Just a little side note. This is more CRP that was sprayed. You can see a little piece of alfalfa. That's alfalfa that's there. It's a plant that's a little bit resistant to glyphosate. And so it killed it dead, or at least it looked dead, and here it is coming back. There are plants that are like that. Glyphosate doesn't kill every one of them. And so I have to echo what's already been said. Spread out those herbicides that you use. Don't use just one single shot. Use a lot of little hammers to do it. That way you don't get this kind of selective resistance. Timing's important. Talk to your crop consultant. I'm sure this is Claire talking to his crop consultant. The other thing about it is no-till, because it's a different world. You're setting a completely different climate, microclimate in that field. You're going to get a different set of weeds than you had before. You knew how to kill that batch. Now you've got a new batch. Goat grass is one of them, but there's others. And so get your crop consultant on the phone, make them earn their money, because there's resistance that builds up. Now, put up with as much residue as possible. And if you can't get through it, get a better drill. We can successfully seed into some very, very heavy residue. But drills that are built like buck rakes, it is not a miracle to see them work like buck rakes. And so, if it looks like a rake and acts like a rake, you know what? You'll have all kinds of fits trying to plant into heavy stubble when you've got that kind of a configuration on the drill. Having a lot of residue, I said before, when you've got that organic matter, it slow feeds. It spoon feeds the nutrients through the year. Now, the first couple of years of no-till, that residue mass is building up, and it'll take nutrients that normally were available, and it'll tie them up in this organic matter. So it's, the nutrients are tied up in that straw, in that thatch. Try to deal with that. Understand what's going on. You'll have to apply some more nutrients in the first few years. When things hit a new equilibrium over here, instead of they were over here, this new equilibrium will be more fertile than it was before. It will be more fertile. But you still have to put on fertilizer, but it maintains the reservoir. It gives a nice slow release of those nutrients to the crop.
How long will that take?
The question was, how many years does that take? And Phil's behind saying, well, 3. And I would guess that it's about that. I think things take, every year it's a less of an adaptation, but after 20 years, I think it's where it's going to be for a long, long time.
And then you also said that when you're a conventional till, you seal that off.
Uh-huh.
How long is it going to take to break that down? How many years is that going to take to get back through there?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I know. If you use a crop like safflower that has these aggressive, it has roots that work like a backhoe, and they penetrate through those layers, and when they decay, they make a hole, and water can get down through that. Safflower is, I think, the most soil building crop when it comes to reducing compaction layers. It's the most that I know of. It's the best that I know of. But if you went with just wheat, it would take longer because it hasn't got those big, heavy tap roots. See, I talked about nitrogen gets tied up. If you bale the residue and haul it away, you may be losing 12 pounds per ton of residue that you haul away. Now, we're kind of thinking in the context of dry land and no-till, but there is such a thing as irrigated no-till, and it works just fine. But you have to take into account when you haul those nutrients off, they're not there anymore. The soil will regenerate some from normal mineralization, but it's better to leave them if you can. 50 pounds of potassium in a ton of residue. Okay, when the early settlers came in and plowed that virgin sod, there were tons of microbes dying. And as they died, they decomposed and they made nutrients available to the crops, and they get incredible crops. First of all, you've got that first year with a little allelopathy going on, and you might not get excellent germination, but for the first few years, things are amazing. Those soils are very fertile. As those microbes have died off, they're dead. If you manage the same way with that plowing and plowing and plowing, you're plowing the health out of that soil. Chicken one day, feathers the next. You can deplete those soils over time. And that's that's why NRCS, we have to look at 7 generations down the road. Can you keep doing what you're doing today and get the same yields, the same results? Can the generations down there benefit as much as you do, or are you mining the land? That's one of the things you have to kind of keep back in mind. It isn't the bottom line. It isn't only the bottom line for this year. It's a bigger picture than that. CRP stands with 1 year of heavy tillage, moldboard, plowland, discus, and then do whatever, several tillage operations will take away the residue that was built up over 10 years of CRP. Soil tests are very important. Even on big acreages, soil tests are important. So you know you can identify and quantify what needs to be taken care of. If you don't know, you can't fix it. Soil tests cost money, and that's just fine. You'll make money by doing soil tests. Now, things to remember. CRP was targeted land. It's least productive. It's got shallow soils. It's got depleted soils. It's got soils that were in trouble to begin with. A lot of guys that had a really bad weed problem said, I'm not going to fight this anymore. It's going into CRP. Guess what? It's still, after 10 years, got a weed problem. Those are things you need to address. If it was never a good field before, you're not going to bring it out and suddenly it'll be the best field, unless all your other fields have gone to pot. So that's something to keep in mind with CRP. Questions?